looked like any other group of kids in the early 1960s. But this wasn't just a dance party.
What do they think about each other? And how would they act together?
It was a sociological experiment for a British documentary called 7 Up. The idea was to gather 7-year-olds from widely different backgrounds and look at Britain's class system through their eyes.
Now let's have the present tense of ammo.
At one end of the extreme, upper-class 7-year-olds, like this trio, attending a boarding school.
I read the Financial Times. I read the Observer and the Times. What do you like about it? Well, I usually look at the headlines and then read about them.
This dormitory is in a children's home, supported by charity.
At the other end of the spectrum, 7-year-olds who were less privileged, like these growing up in a group home.
What do you think about rich people?
Well, not much.
After it first aired back in 1964, the boys and girls, 14 of them in all, became mini celebrities. Their wit and charm, infectious.
What do you think about girlfriends at your age? Tell me what you think.
I've got one, but I don't think much of her.
The man who plucked them from obscurity all those years ago is Michael Apted, who back then was just a 22-year-old researcher on the project.
It was very funny, the original one, but it was also alarming. You could see that people's views of the world were totally determined by where they were coming from, and those who had somewhat impoverished backgrounds had a very narrow view of the world, and those who were empowered had this grand view, not just of the world, but of their lives.
My heart's desire is to see my daddy.
I like to see my father occasionally.
He was so struck by what they said
I got married because I wanted to have a child.
that he vowed to track the same group down every 7 years ever since.
They are now 56.
The latest installment, 56 Up, debuts in U.S. theaters this month, the continuation of a series that critic Roger Ebert calls one of the best films of all time. What is it that makes this so compelling?
Well, because I think people identify with it. I think you see 13, 14 stories up there, and there's elements in some of them that, hit home on every life. Everybody who watches it can identify with something.
Maybe I may want to go to a university, but I don't know which one yet.
Susie is one of his favorites. When she was 7, the series pried into her thoughts on boys.
Tell me, do you have any boyfriends, Susie?
Yes.
And over the years, Apted kept asking,
He lives up in
watch.
Scotland.
Have you got any boyfriends, Susie? What is your attitude towards marriage?
Well, I don't know. I haven't given it a lot of thought because I'm very, very cynical about it.
When I last saw you at 21, you were nervous, you were chain-smoking, you were uptight, and now you seem happy. What's happened to you over these last 7 years?
I suppose Rupert.
Now at 56, she's still married to Rupert, with 2 grown sons and a daughter.
I mean, there are great moments in the film, aren't there, when you cut from one generation to another and it's night and day.
During the 7 years between the films, Apted was busy making other movies, blockbuster movies.
Miss Loretta Lynn.
I'm about as old-fashioned as I can.
He directed Sissy Spacek in her Academy Award-winning performance in Coal Miner's Daughter. He directed Gorillas in the Mist, too, nominated for 5 Oscars. He even did a James Bond film.
As a young man, Paul spent many years in the building trade.
But it's these relatively small-budget 7-year retrospectives that Apted considers his life's work.
From this Liverpool suburb, we chose Neil.
And tough work it is. Not all those little lives went the way you'd think or hoped. Take Neil, for example.
When I grow up, I want to be an astronaut. But if I can't be an astronaut, I think I'll be a coach driver.
By the time Neil was 14, he was planning for college. But by 21, he had dropped out and was working on a construction site. When Apted found him at 28, Neil was homeless, wandering the English countryside.
I simply have to find the warmest shed I can find.
Apted was sympathetic, but he pressed ahead with sometimes piercing questions.
Do you worry about your sanity?
Other people sometimes worry about it.
How tough is that?
It's very tough. Sometimes I've asked questions and I've watched the film with an audience, and the audience gasp, and I think, oh my God. Sometimes I think I may have gone too far.
In the end, though, Neil found his footing.
I just point out some of the...
By 42, he ran and was elected to his town's council.
Welcome to our service today.
By 56, he'd even become a lay minister in his church. But having his life's stumbles exposed hasn't been easy for him or any of the Up series participants.
Do you have a girlfriend?
I don't want to answer that. I don't answer those kind of questions.
From the start, Nick was a bit reluctant.
I thought that one would come up because...
By 14, he didn't even look at the camera. By 21, he questioned Apted on camera about the series as a whole.
It's just that the limitations of such things as what the audience require and the time don't allow it to be a real study.
Still, Nick has never backed out. Over the years, we've watched him move from his rural farm in the UK here to the US.
So the area that I'm looking at is this times this.
Becoming a professor at the University of Wisconsin. He got married, had a son, got divorced, and got married again.
Is he sexy?
Oh, man.
And Apted's sometimes uncomfortable questions
absolutely
never stop.
I mean, he's not deliberately setting out to be mean to us, but, you know, making good TV is absolutely his top priority.
Have you told Michael how painful it is?
Oh, he knows.
Thank you very much. Thank you, yes.
But he says the pain is worth it.
Do you regret doing it as you look back on it?
No, I don't, no. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, you know, it would be kind of pathetic to opt out of it. Even if it's painful, it's interesting and it's important.
Not all of them disliked the process. Little Tony Walker seemed to relish it.
I want to be a jockey when I grow up. Yeah, I want to be a jockey when I grow up.
He was a roughneck kid from London's East End who did indeed become a jockey.
I once met Kojak, I picked him up.
But by 28, he traded his horse for a London cab. And that's where we found him.
I'm very lucky to have that documentation of my life.
Not that he's had an easy go of it. At 42, he admitted in the series to having an affair.
I have had regretful behaviour various times, but through...
You got caught. And that was it.
My wife wasn't very happy in the fact that, you know, it came out. And I was wrong, but my wife and I are now real strong as ever.
The idea of looking at a bunch of people over time and how they evolve, that was a really nifty idea.
Apted says he'll keep the series going as long as everyone is willing and healthy. The thought of anyone dying, he says, is too much to bear.
People say, how will I deal with it? Well, I just don't know. I don't know how I deal with it until I have to. Hopefully I won't have to deal with it. Hopefully I'll go first.
I'm only a cabbie. I mean, I'm not exactly a movie star.
His goal? To keep it going until his film family is in its 80s. Apted will by then be nearly 100.
I figured out when I do 84 up, I'll be 99, so that should be a good swan song, shouldn't it?